There's some amazing things happening in the culture in which we live. There are Titanic shifts taking place, seismic shifts, if you're allowed to say such things in Christchurch, seismic shifts that are taking place within the culture around us. You see, just a few years ago, just a handful of years ago, 20 years ago, the culture that we lived in was so thoroughly committed to something called postmodernism. From the 90s through into the 2000s, 2010, around that sort of mark, the culture was locked into this idea of postmodernism. Postmodernism teaches that there is no truth. That there is no truth, that there is no one overarching truth. Everybody has their own truth. Everybody has their own point of view, and their view of truth is true for them. And nobody's truth is better than anybody else's truth. All truth is equally valid. That's the way the culture used to think. Not long ago. And that in itself was a relatively recent development. Up until the 60s, the vast majority of the culture would say no, something is either true or false. It's either true or false. But that began to shift, and it really caught its peak in the 90s and overflowed into the early 2000s. No truth. Everybody has their own truth. You get to decide what's true for you. I get to decide what's true for me. And what's true for me is true for me. And what's true for you is true for you. And no truth is more true than anybody else's truth. They are all equal. Which means that there's no such thing as morality, because it would have to be, if you were going to say that this is the right moral way, then you would have to say that that moral way is in fact true. And there is no truth, so there can't be any true morality, right? So everybody has their own view of morality. Everybody decides what's right in their own eyes. And does what's right according to them. You do you. Right? That's the way the culture used to think. Again, we're only talking 20 years here. 30 years tops. Well within my lifetime. So what I'm saying to you is that in my lifetime, the time when I was in high school and became an adult into my 20s, a radically new idea took grip of a culture. And now, some 20, 30 years later, a new idea has gripped the culture. That's two monumental shifts in that short time. For many of you here, the vast majority of your lifetime was lived under one ruling principle. There is such a thing as truth, and you stick to it. And so that shows how quickly the changes are coming now in cultural thinking. So it used to be that people thought there was no truth, and as a result, no morality. That is not the way the culture operates anymore. The culture now operates as a religious culture. The culture we live in is a religious culture. You see, the previous culture thought there was, my generation really, thought that there was no truth, no morality. We didn't like religion. Keep your religion to yourself because it's got an overarching story. It's got an overarching truth that you have to abide by. It's got a set of moral ideas that you have to live by. And so religion went out the window. Everybody did what was right and right. So in my generation, religion went out the window. We don't want to talk about religion. We're not living in a religious culture anymore. It's an irreligious culture. It's a culture that has no religion, and a culture that is in fact against religion. Do you see that? The culture has swung in a different direction now. The culture is a religious culture that adheres to truth. The culture now believes there is such a thing as truth. An objective truth, an absolute truth that you must adhere to. And from that truth follow moral absolutes that you must cling to. And if you do not hold to the majority view of those moral standards, then you will be ostracized. You will be cut off. You will be publicly ridiculed. You will be dismantled. Your career, your public standing, your credibility, all of it will be dismantled and destroyed because you are a heretic. That's the culture we now live in. The culture of woke. Woke is religion. Wokeism is religion. That's all it is. It's a religion with an objective truth, a standard, and a morality that flows out of that. And the minute you step outside of the bonds of that truth and that morality and start teaching something contrary to that truth and that morality, you will be cut off. You will be abandoned. You will be ostracized. You will be cast out. You will become the unclean. You will become the deplorables. As Hillary Clinton said, you are just deplorables. They're a basket of deplorables. And so in religious culture, there are the clean and the unclean. There are those who belong, and there are the outsiders. And that division, that insider-outsider mentality, that clean-unclean rubric flows naturally out of a religious commitment to moral law-keeping. Wherever you have moral law, you have the insiders and the outsiders. Wherever you have moral law, you have us and them. You have the clean and the unclean. You have the circumcised and the uncircumcised. Wherever you have a religious culture built on law-keeping, that's what you get. Division, separation, hostility. And folks, this is what we see in the church. Where the church clings to the laws of Moses, this is what we see. You filthy lot out there, you basket of deplorables, you unclean, filthy scum, you unrighteous, going to hell in a handbasket, and us in here, righteous, saved by the grace of God and our own self-righteousness through keeping laws of Moses and doing our good works. That's what has happened to the church. So much of the church is like that. And folks, it stinks. And you can smell it. You catch the waft of it. And it might not be as overt as that. Oh, the filth out there. It may be, we're not going out there because we're afraid of the darkness outside. And we don't want to have anything to do with the people out there because they are unclean. And they believe things that are different to us. And we don't know how to deal with that. So we'll just stay in here and keep with the clean people, and close the doors, and put gates around it, and shut the walls, and shut the windows, and shut the curtains, and wait for Jesus to come back. It's the same stuff. It's the same stuff. It's the natural outworking of a religious culture that is built on moral law keeping.